taking just a second, it looks like. Normally it's instant. There we go. All right, the recording has started, and this is the October 7th Crossplane community meeting. So we're still filling out the agenda a little bit here, and folks are more than welcome to add things that they want to talk about, so we can keep filling out the agenda as we're going along here. Let's dive right on in here. I had 1.4.1 as a release, but I think that was actually from the last community meeting. So I don't think there has been a recent patch release for Crossplane. Has there been? There hasn't been a 1.4.2 or anything else, has there? Muaf or Dan or anybody?
Sorry, say it again.
Has there haven't been any like recent upstream Crossplane releases since the last community meeting, right? 1.4.1 I think was right before the last community meeting.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact date, but that is the latest release that we've done. Yeah.
Yeah, let me just look to see what the data is on that one. See if we need to dive into anything about. Yeah. That was before the last community meeting. Okay, cool. All right, so then we're working towards 1.5. The release date there is towards the end of this month here, so we have a few more weeks for before we do a code and feature freeze on that. So we can keep we'll take a look at the 1.5 board, and really the main importance here is we can talk about some of the obstacles and some of the risks, but we also want to talk about, hey, is there anything that folks are working on in the community that they need some help on or need a push to help get in for this release that's towards the end of the month. Oops. All right. Yeah, so we'll talk about, most of the team's focus has been on the Terra work, obviously, so which is a huge part of upcoming releases. But in terms of general upstream Crossplane, the things coming on here, does anybody want to raise a flag or bring up any risks or things that they need help with for 1.5? All right. I know there's some other PRs linked later on in the agenda that we'll get to also, so we can dive into those there. But if anybody from the community that wants to raise flags on 1.5 features are more than welcome to in this format or on Slack. That's always available. So then, maybe we could just go ahead and dive into some of the updates for all the providers and TerraJet and the surrounding ecosystem around core Crossplane. So Muaf, if you want to get us started here with updates on TerraJet, dive on in.
Yeah. So we have now more XRM features, and in fact, right now, once you configure your object, the TerraJet resource should be fully XRM compliant. So one of the things was late initialization, which Alper has implemented. That is generic and using reflection library. We're testing a few different classes of resources, and we're fixing some exceptional cases there. But for most resources, it works as expected. And the second thing is cross-resource referencing, which Hassan has integrated the tooling in Crossplane tools into TerraJet, because if you want to use the reference resolver generation, you also need to add the reference selector fields to the schema, and that's what we do in TerraJet. So once you say hey, this is the field that will reference that type, we first add the field reference and selector fields, and then put the command to make Crossplane tools part work. And connection details secret is again Hassan's update. I think the last two, connection details secret and sensitive input, Hassan can give an update about those two.
Yeah, sure. Basically, one of the problems that we have identified in the previous technical release of TerraJet-based providers was we were keeping TF state in the annotation, and TF state could include sensitive information. And basically, we need to keep this sensitive information in a like Kubernetes compatible way to make sure that they land on secrets, etc. And you know, like Crossplane already has the notion of connection details secrets, so it is the number one thing that we would need to solve. Like the fields that marked as sensitive should go into connection details secret if like they are outputs, but sometimes they could be the inputs. Like for example, for a database, a database password could be, master password could be an input, and in this case we should take that input from a secret. So basically in a single PR we kind of handled all different cases, including like reading connections secrets from TF state and storing them or persisting them in Kubernetes secrets and generating the required schema, etc. So it was one of the I think big changes that I spent my most of time till the last community meeting. Yeah, that's pretty much it about connection details.
Yeah, thanks, Hasan. In addition to that, we used to, like, it is somewhat like related. We used to store the TF state in annotation, which also had like, you know, sensitive fields. So connection detail secret stuff removed that need, like, you know, to have that information in the TF state, but we also removed it from the annotation completely. So right now, if the TF state file is gone, we are already producing it from, like, you're using spec status and also the content of the connection detail secret. So we're not relying on any like, you know, secondary source of truth like TF state. Just like, you know, other providers, the custom resource itself, the YAML that is stored in each CD is our, like, you know, one and only source of truth. In addition to that, we have implemented the memory-based bookkeeping for, like, you know, all the operations. Before that, we used to have, like, you know, Crossplane logs and Terraform logs as well. And with the experience that we got during testing and development, we decided to switch to a memory base where we store all the operation metadata in a map, essentially. And this allowed us, like, you know, to be more flexible with, like, you know, debugging, testing, and also not tied to not tied, like, you know, file logs. And we also removed the Terraform logs as well. So right now, if you stop and start the TerraJet provider, it will just go on with its operation. And if you even delete the workspace completely, it'll still work. So that is, like, you know, that was, like, you know, one of the big changes that I've worked on. And with that, we introduced a few more methods on the workspace client. Specifically the synchronous calls. So right now, for every resource, you can choose to use either sync or async mode in the controller. And that means that, for example, for VPCs, we're using synchronous mode where it is blocking until the apply operation is completed, and then, like, you know, takes the state and, like, you know, does the necessary operations. For resources that, like, you know, whose creation takes long, like database and cluster, users, like developers, can say, like, you know, hey, use async API for this. And we recommend it, like, you know, for the resources whose creation takes, like, you know, more than a minute. And in that case, like, you know, we issue, like, you know, async calls, and we keep track of those operations, and, like, you know, let you know about the operation in the conditions of the, like, you know, resource, with, like, you know, details and errors and all that stuff. So I think these are, like, you know, the main things that we have worked on. So I think the best news for this, like, you know, as a result of this recent sprint, is that we are, like, you know, XRM compliant completely, even, like, you know, better than in some, like, better than some resources in native providers. So we are going to cut an alpha release in the next coming days. Right now, we are thinking about, like, you know, capping the number of resources that we generate to 50. in Azure and AWS, because like, because of the bugs and like, other changes that we make, the custom configuration object interface could change, which means like, we have to go back and update the custom config of every resource. So we're thinking of capping it at 50. But like, I believe after the alpha release, like, we're going to have a meeting and like, discuss whether these resources can actually exist in native provider or they should, stay in their own provider. But until then, like, alpha release will be open for testing by the community. I mean, even today you can test it, but like, alpha release will be like a properly tagged complete release that you can use. So yeah, that's I think all I got for TerraJet.
Awesome. Yeah, those are pretty exciting updates there, and I'm really excited for the alpha releases and for people to be able to get their hands on it and try it out. So that's really cool progress there. And then so we will make an announcement and kind of make sure that people on Slack and Twitter know when those alpha providers are ready, and that people can start really kind of taking them for a trial there and getting all the feedback too. That's how we improve everything here in the community, is all the feedback that we get. So very excited about that.
Yep.
Cool. I wanted to call out also in terms of recent releases that the first release for provider GitLab came out about a week ago or so. So great work to Jan and the rest of the team there that have been focusing on that. And so it's really nice to have this as I like this because it's an interesting example of using Crossplane to manage anything with an API, right? This isn't necessarily something you would think of for a traditional cloud provider infrastructure or databases and things like that, but you can integrate in a full picture, full perspective of software delivery to manage some of the GitLab entities as well. So it's really cool to see this first release out there. So yeah, great work to everybody contributing to provider GitLab. Awesome. All right, so we'll go through some updates then for the other major cloud providers, AWS, GCP, and Azure. So let's see, I guess Aaron and Moaf, if you want to talk about AWS for a minute here.
Yeah, I'll go. I mean, I can go first because I spent most of last week on it. So we're doing big pushes to get a lot of long-standing older PRs merged in. There's a lot of resource generation that's happened over the last month or so that's just been waiting for review. We did get glue resources, EC2 instances, transfer service, and CloudFront cache policy in last week. I'll let Muvafik speak to the SDK upgrade and the work he's done this week, but we're putting a massive effort behind getting resources the community has generated, reviewed, and merged in as fast as we can.
Yeah. So this week, I was I focused on provider AWS, the PRs, but mostly I started with Sdk V2 update because it has been a long running issue that we're still using 0 something version of AWS SDK, and that held us back with implementing specific features that the community wanted. And one example was EKS, capacity type, and themes. These fields are just not available in the old SDK version. And this update had huge changes from programmatic interface perspective. And some community users, I believe Ender V, I don't remember his first name, and also Steve Camalo, they did a lot of work, and I merged the PR and open fixes, small fixes to make it compile and stuff. So that is done, and right now we're using the latest and AWS Sdk V2 in the manually written resources. For the generated ones, we rely on ACK, and that uses another version. In addition that I already mentioned, but EKS now has the missing features that are introduced in AWS SDK V2 last version, and in the coming days I have some some more work to do with the community push that I wasn't able to focus as much as I would like to. So I will keep working on that in the beginning of next week with the prioritizing the PRs mentioned here and the other ones that are assigned to me. Yeah.
There was a question in Slack providers about cutting the next release. Do you have an ETA on that?
Yeah, I haven't had the chance to write an answer, but yeah, I believe we are. Yeah, we can make release any day, and I feel like by the end of next week we can do one, because I will focus more on getting more PRs merged, or I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence, because we could also make a release today, for example, with the Sdk V2 to de-risk the next releases. So yeah.
Sooner the better on my vote, because they're outside. What you haven't listed here is the Aurora cluster is completely broken in the current release. So there's, I think, a whole set of people waiting on the fix that's on master branch for the new kind of DB instance for actually be able to create an Aurora cluster. So
you mean the issue about joining an existing cluster, right?
no, it's like you will. Yeah, I mean, the workflow is you create a cluster and you create an instance, and those two are associated together. That does not work today. And there's a new kind that was introduced, which is DB instance under RDS that solves for it, and it all works beautifully on the master branch. But a nice release would work. Would make everybody happy. At least for those who work with Aurora RDS.
Yeah. I'll just go over and see how many PRs that we have very close to merging, because if you release today, they will have to wait for another release. So I'll look over the PRs, and we can have a release tomorrow with all the new changes that we've got, because I believe many PRs also landed thanks to Aaron, his reviews and effort from the community. So we can I think it's there's a merit in making a release now that we have enough of changes that we can release it without the usual cadence, the implicit cadence.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Jillian. That's definitely a good point. And one maybe we should consider as well, with functionality that is broken, maybe we can think a little bit more about patches for that, of doing patch releases and getting the functionality that the community is depending on, or has worked and now it's regressed, to get that out sooner. So that's a good reminder, and thank you for bringing that up, Jillian.
Yeah, did that functionality used to work with RDS instance type?
I don't know. And I'm going to take I was on leave when it all got released. So I was just getting my hands on it to get an example impl together for our team, and saw that it got fixed in main and there was a new kind introduced. So it may never have worked.
Gotcha. All right. Thanks.
All right. Yep. So we will, with the big push. So thank you, Aaron and Wafik, for getting a lot of new features merged in there, and then obviously thanks to the community and for contributing all these new features. With that push there, let's definitely do what we can to get a release out soon and get all this functionality out there. All right, Hassan, do you want to give us an update on GCP?
Yeah, sure. Actually, we don't have a lot of updates on GCP side. There were a couple of PRs that got merged, and I would say there are two fixes. Actually, yeah, there is one fix and two new features. One is PubSub topic has now a reference to KMS key, thanks to Muwaffaq and the auto generation of reference resolvers. We started supporting GCP Cloud SQL backup point in time recovery configuration. And also there are a couple of minor fixes and documentation updates, etc. Yeah, that's all from GCP side till the last community meeting.
Yeah, and Hassan, is there an anticipated release then for GCP with some of this new functionality?
Not really. Actually, we till the last provider GCP release, it didn't take too much time. So maybe we can do a release with the new Crossplane release. But I think there is no major feature missing on the last release, I would say.
Awesome. Well, let's keep our eyes open then for anyone from the community that is waiting for his functionality or wants to take a dependency on it, and we can consider doing a release in an earlier time frame if there's demand from the community for it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And Alper, you are here as well. Do you want to give us an update on Azure?
Yeah, unfortunately, not so many updates on the Azure side. During the push week, we had many of the PRs reviewed at least once, but we need to run them to completion. Maybe something worth to mention is we have evaluated the effects of some recent Crossplane runtime changes. This was brought to my attention by Muaffak. And there are certain resources on the Azure side that we create with an asynchronous API like the PostgreSQL server. And during the creation phase, we need to we store in the current implementation the feature object. It's a JSON object, by the way, returned by the Azure SDK in the status conditions of the managed resource. And with the recent changes on the Crossplane runtime side, we will no longer be able to modify the state of the managed resource during the creation phase. And this is right now a blocker for provider Azure before we can update the Crossplane runtime version. I did some investigations, debugging, etc., to fully understand the situation and its effects. Another maybe interesting thing is, for TerraJet-based providers, as we talked in the previous community meeting, we were performing some scaling experiments. And, since the last community meeting, we have also performed some scalability experiments for comparison, with the native provider. This means that, we have done some scaling experiments for the native provider also. Details are in that comment. Yeah, so this is my update.
Is this the comment you were talking about right here, Alper? Like with the details?
Sorry, Jared, could you please repeat?
Yeah, was this the comment here you were talking about that had all the details?
Yes, that is the one.
Look at all these graphs.
Yeah, I mean, during these experiments, we take various measurements, collected from controller runtime and also, from our providers and the API server, the Kubernetes API server itself. Yeah. So basically, I did not try to fully utilize. By the way, these experiments are performed on, E2 standards, on an E2 standard machine in a GKE cluster. So the idea was not to stress test provider Azure, but we were testing Terraform-based providers up to 100 resources, etc. And we were observing how they behave. And I just went with 250 managed resources for provider Azure, and it hardly hits 10% CPU utilization on a 4-core E2 standard machine, Google virtual machine.
Right
And
on.
also, you can see a histogram of, we have defined a metric, in which when you create the managed resource, it gets this creation timestamp. And then when it gets to the ready state, it gets its status conditions of type ready with this timestamp. Using the delta there, we can see how long it took for the managed resource to become ready after, we had provisioned it. So the histogram you see belongs to, how the times, how the, time to readiness measurements, are distributed for 250 resources. And by the way, these are, reconciled simultaneously.
Yep, all the the deep dive you've done into performance is really, really useful out there to inform, where we need to be making improvements or investments to, to increase the performance or the, scale at which it's operating. And then all this the data here is really, really useful too.
Yeah, and also, Muafak mentioned many improvements on the, TerraJet side, as you all heard. So we are also planning to, rerun similar experiments to see our performance gains and, our bottlenecks and the points, the new points for which, we can plan for improvements.
All right, so lots going on. Those are all the updates about where the community and the team's been focusing. So I think I'll open the floor real quick for any other comments on releases, PR, or not PRs, we'll talk about PRs later, but any upcoming releases and milestones, if anybody wants to make a comment before we move to the community topics. Okay, cool. Let's hop on in to the community topics then. So, as always, the first section is just kind of highlighting some recent content from the community and around Crossplane. There are two different write-ups recently from folks in the greater community that were interesting. Mark and Abhishek had both written cool blog posts around some of their experiences with Crossplane and some of the things that they were building. Like for instance, this one that Mark wrote was around AKS clusters and using Helm to deploy resources to it. So that was pretty interesting if folks want to read up on that one. And then also the GKE cluster one that Abhishek had focused on was pretty interesting, in addition to the delicious looking popsicle at the beginning of the article there. So a couple of write-ups from community folks to share there. And then I know that Victor had done some collaborations with Nirmata and Straya as well too. So those are, I don't have links to those. And I'm not sure if they're posted maybe to their YouTube channels of those companies, but those were definitely interesting content as well that maybe we can get links to them added to the agenda documents. But Victor has been working on those and delivering some interesting stuff there. And then, so KubeCon North America is next week. So a lot of folks will be involved with that. I think a lot of folks are maybe doing it virtually, but there will be a bit of presence. Dan will be in LA at the conference there. I think Grant will be there also. So some folks from the community will be there in person. We have a Crossplane office hours session is probably one of the bigger events for us there at KubeCon. So on Wednesday at 1:30, there is an office hour session where the set of maintainers will be there, will be presenting on Crossplane and answering questions, giving some demos and stuff. The audience, if it's anything like KubeCon EU was, where we had like 200 people show up there to participate, it'll be a wide range of familiarity and experience with Crossplane. So we will be doing some introductory content for the folks that are maybe newer to Crossplane, but we'll be able to deep dive into a lot of stuff as well. It'll be largely community driven in the questions that come in. So folks can attend and participate and maybe even help out with answering questions in the chat also. So there's definitely some opportunities to get involved there, and really excited to see, meet more folks from the community and be able to collaborate and explore it together. So that'll be pretty fun. So that's definitely a big event next week, like 6 days from now, on Wednesday at 1:30 Pacific, that is, where the conference is held in person. And then there's a couple of talks that are focusing on Crossplane and from Crossplane contributors as well. So I've linked all of them here in the agenda document, so you can add those to your schedule for KubeCon. So Mauricio is doing a talk that is pretty interesting around some of the tools that he wished had been available when he was building the SaaS a couple of years ago. One of those tools is Crossplane, so he'll be focusing on that a little bit. Some of the folks from Google, like Megan and Shabir there, will be showing a couple of different ways to configure and manage your Kubernetes resources. Crossplane is one of the tools that they'll be diving into there, so that'll be some interesting content also. And then our very own Stephen and Dan got talks accepted at KubeCon. Stephen's is interesting because it's going to be focusing on code generation, of which we're doing a lot of in the Crossplane project, and the work that everyone was talking about with Terra, and then the native code generation with the cloud providers and partnerships there. There's a whole bunch of interesting stuff about code generation in general, how it works in the ecosystem, how KubeBuilder, controller runtimes use it, and then how Crossplane is using it. So that'll be a good talk. And then Dan is collaborating with John from Google, that is one of the contributors or maybe founder, I'm not sure, for the Go Container Registry project. And they'll be talking about some very interesting usages of container registries. So that'll be a cool talk to listen to also. So add those to your schedule, and lots of possibilities for those next week at KubeCon. Anybody here going to be there in person? Anybody traveling to LA or that will be at KubeCon in person on this call today?
Hey, I will be there, but I am a new to this community as well.
Hey, Sergey, nice to meet you.
Yeah, I'm an architect from AppDynamics company. We are building GitOps deployment platform. We using Crossplane compositions.
Nice.
I think we will be actively engaging with this community in the future. I joined today's call mostly to learn more about this community meeting, just discovered it. So
awesome. Yeah, it was super nice to meet you, and we're excited to hear more about the what you're building and the compositions there. And if there's any of that stuff you can share, there's always opportunities to like either share it on Slack or in like the GitHub discussions area. There's like a show and tell thing there, so it's always cool to see what folks in the community are building and kind of sharing that knowledge. It is really, really cool.
Yeah, I'm also a co-speaker for a couple sessions for GitCon and Service MeshCon. So
nice.
It will be on Tuesday. I can post and advertise our sessions.
Yeah. If you do that, definitely, so folks can learn about them, and we can put links to in the agenda document here if you want to throw those on there. That's awesome. Congratulations on those talks.
Yeah. Now to finish the presentation by Tuesday.
Right on. All right. Then yeah, so that's everything for KubeCon, I think. So there's some other agenda items that are actively being added right now. So Jillian, do you want to bring those up as you're
yeah, sure. Sorry, I was just making more context to that last one versus like read this and this. The first one, we're looking for more community feedback on the composition revision management. So I presented a problem, a noob who's also from my organization and actually my boss, you know, suggested an idea. Nick had, you know, commented on here saying that we're kind of looking for some more feedback and output to see what other people's opinions are, or if they're having any issues, or if they've even reached to the stage of implementation. For us, as we're, you know, actively developing and we manage multiple Kubernetes clusters, more than multiple, then some sort of solution is necessary for us, and we're just looking to see what other people have come across, and, you know, so that we can kind of come together and agree on what this should look like before any solution is developed.
And Jillian, was you may have already done this, I bet, but adding a link to this call for feedback to Slack, so folks see it there, would be good if you haven't already done it, or if you have, another reminder there doesn't hurt at all. So
Okay.
feel free to
I think,
post that.
yeah, I'll post it back to say, hey, come take a look.
Yeah.
Because we definitely want to make some movement on that, as it is highly important for us as we try to gain adoption, and things like Aurora clusters and things like that, where we have to use the composition revision feature in order to successfully manage it. Something like this is important and for our success in getting Crossplane adopted. And so this
sounds great, Jillian. And then you have another item too?
Yeah, the second one is regarding resource references of dependencies. So Vinod had sent us a message in Slack, and then I think Mivaf, you referenced us to an issue related to this, and about how we, you know, patching from common data sources. This is obviously of real interest, and I know it's made some progress, but not a ton. And just kind of curious on how we can help move things like that forward, especially based off of the problem statement here. You know, things like the VPC and security groups. These are things that we would love to be able to patch because they're known and created at the cluster level, but are definitely referenced by resources like RDS.
Yeah. Yeah, so we originally, like, if you see my comment and an actual open PR, the design doc, we were thinking about like tackling this in the context of generic references. And one of the reasons that we were planning to do the generic references was, like, you know, the cases where we wouldn't have references in build time, but let users do that. But the main problem with this design and the original design here, like, you know, having a patch for like common data sources, is the security implications of it. For example, if we allow the managed resource to have to be able to fetch data from, like, you know, for example, secrets, then it means, like, you know, whoever has access to that managed resource RBAC has access to those secrets, like, you know, that provider can access. And for Crossplane, that means, like, you know, if composition can access that, like, you know, secret, then it means, like, you know, anyone who is able to, like, you know, create a claim, like, you know, they would be able to essentially access to the secret, to the arbitrary secret, which is because, like, you know, Crossplane has access to all of those. So these are, like, you know, the main security concerns, and the big initial motivation for the generic references was actually related to TerraJet, because, like, you know, before starting the TerraJet, we were thinking that, like, you know, cross-resource references would be really hard to do in TerraJet in a generic way, so we would need that. But it turned out that, like, you know, we didn't have to have generic references for that to work, and we were able to, like, you know, implement strong typed usual cross-resource reference for TerraJet. So right now, that generic resource references PR is put on hold. So I believe, like, you know, the way we attack this problem is, like, you know, back to the initial idea where we add a new patch type. and we need to think through about with security implications, because right now all patches work with the existing composite or other managed resources that are composed in the same composition. But that mean that would mean some outside access that we need to give Crossplane and indirectly to the users that use that composition. So that's that was the big concern there. But I can I can leave a comment about this summarizing this, and maybe brainstorm about how we can design the API so that we don't cause indirect access to stuff that users do not normally have access.
Right. And that makes sense, right?
Mhm.
Especially since, from a cluster perspective, people put in security controls to prevent things from leaking. But we obviously want to make sure that we improve the application developer experience and not having them to, when you're composing infrastructure, not having to provide things that are known to the cluster and are expected of the application developer to use when they're provisioning a resource, right? And, again, calling out the VPC ID and the security group. They shouldn't really have to know that as an application developer, because that's not necessarily known to them. They're just utilizing the Kubernetes cluster, at least from our use case and how we present the developer experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll summarize, and it would be helpful for you. If I don't know if you have a comment on that issue, but describing the example use case would be really helpful there.
Okay, sounds great.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, great feedback, Jillian, and pushing forward some of those features there. That's really, really helpful. Okay. Next thing on the agenda that I see is from Max with AWS PR for 822.
Yes, exactly. That's from us. So we have the situation that AWS does not automatically tag the subnets anymore, starting from, I don't know, EKS version 1.21 or something. So we have to tag them manually. And because we already have a subnet resource, and if we spawn a number of Kubernetes clusters in the same subnet, then we cannot edit the same subnet resource. And so we created this tag resource, and yeah, so we can tag some resources inside the some EC2 resources. But this turned out to be quite a big PR, and there was a big discussion going on and how to implement this. And because nothing happened for a few weeks, I was wondering, maybe, I don't know if we can discuss how to move forward on this.
Yeah,
because this would help us a lot.
Yeah. So I see some comments from Nick and Carl regarding that. So usually, I mean, I think Nick also wrote about that. Historically, we've been adding tags fields to the resources themselves to have a consistent experience, because essentially the reason EC2 resources doesn't have those tags is that the API is old, so they had to add a new API call in order to enable tagging. For example, when you look at EKS cluster APIs, they already have the tags. So that was a deliberate decision that we made, and Terraform does it as well, including the tags map or array, whatever the API wants there, as a field, top level field in the parameters, so that users can change them. But obviously that brings some complexity in terms of code. You need to calculate the diff and add and remove things. And I see that from your comment here, that subnet resource controller doesn't have the implementation to be correct and working like others, right?
Yeah, exactly. The subnet controller only adds tags; it never removes them. So
yeah. So I think I think the option here could be like, to actually like, edit that logic to be able to like, get a div and add and remove stuff. Like, essentially the logic that you implemented here could be moved to there to be as part of that subnet controller. I think, for example, VPC should have like the full logic as well. Like, there are some resources and like, some functions that they use that you can like reuse because it's all in the EC2 package. So I would suggest like, I would suggest going through like, subnet controller and see whether you can like, enhance the logic there to be able to remove as well. If that's like, what you need originally.
yeah, but the thing is that we cannot edit the subnet resource after. So the subnet resource is kind of static, and it was, if when we set up our infrastructure in the first place, and so it's kind of read only more or less. And then if we let's say later on we spawn some EKS clusters, then we just have to tag the subnet separately, and so we cannot have kind of because it's done via composition, and I think we cannot just override or add a tag entry to the subnet, and that's the problem we're having.
Gotcha. So the reason you implement a different resource is that you would like to add tags to subnet CR without actually making changes on the subnet CR itself.
Yeah, exactly. So our idea was that we have a composition with I don't know, security group and EKS cluster, and set up all the things that are necessary, and then also have a tag resource that just adds a tag to the subnet that's referenced, or to the subnets, because we have multiple availability zones, and just add this one tag to the subnet, and all this via one composition.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's an interesting use case. Yeah. Let me think through and like, write a comment there. And I also need to like, read the rest of the comments.
Yeah, sure.
Because we have this API patterns doc that explains like, how we decide to make a resource a resource on its own, or as part of like, parameters of another resource. So for example, if we do end up having a tag resource, we need to remove tags field from all other EC2 resources, because like otherwise the controllers, since they're actively reconciling, they would get into a racing condition. So I would like, let me think through that, like, see how we can like, enable you in your use case specifically. And I can post the link as well. Yeah, so this doc, the convention stock, it is like, in addition to the KRM, like Kubernetes API convention stock. And that's like, what we usually follow when we make like, API decisions like that, like, whether it should be a single resource or it's parameters of another one.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks. So yeah, if we could add a comment on what you think about this issue, then this would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for that, Max, and bringing up that discussion there. And thanks, Wafik, for weighing in on with your perspectives as well too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So that's everything that was on the agenda here. A couple minutes left before top of the hour. Did anyone have other items they wanted to bring up? I saw Sergey added talks for KubeCon and related zero-day events and such there. So thanks for doing that, Sergey. Any other things to bring up in this while we are all together? All right. Cool. Then we can adjourn, and we have some follow-ups for some of the topics that were brought up today, and we'll keep talking on Slack and GitHub, and hopefully we'll see some folks next week with KubeCon.
Yeah,
Right.
how you basically meet at the KubeCon?
Yeah,
will it be the office hour, will it be in person or virtual?
Yeah, some folks will be in person, like Dan will be there in person, and Grant will be there in person. I live in San Diego, so I might pop up for one of the days also. So we can coordinate that on Slack probably. And then at the office hours is another good place to get folks together at the office hours session, link to here.
Yeah.
All right. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. We'll see you all next time.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya. Have a nice day.